Hey everybody, Deathblade here with another Chinese fantasy novel FAQ. Believe it or not, I think this video is probably the most frequently asked question I get. I have people asking all the time, what do I recommend for Chinese fantasy novels? And so this is going to be my official recommendations video. Before I get started, I want to point out, number one, I'm on lockdown in California because of coronavirus COVID-19. And also with me in the house is baby Deathblade, my son. He's 4. He is currently being kept occupied by his grandmother. Let's hope that continues and it doesn't get really loud or that he barges in, which he very well might.
20 minutes later.
Now the main character of this novel...
Can we hear?
Yes, hey look, I'm recording a video.
Look at you.
Yeah.
No.
I'm almost done.
No, I need a pet you.
In a minute.
Wait. No, I want it. I need to. I'm serious.
As I suspected, baby Deathblade barged in to pet the cat. Okay, so where did I leave off? Main character, Ray. That's number one thing. Number two is, this video was voted on by the patrons on Patreon. If you like the content that I do and you'd like to support this channel specifically, think about becoming a patron. You can find the link in the description below. I occasionally have the patrons vote on what topics they would like me to do a video on, and so that's where this video is coming from. Now, a disclaimer before I get into it, I am talking in this video specifically about Wuxia novels. If you don't know the difference between Wuxia, Xianxia, and Suanhua, or basically Wuxia, martial arts, and the cultivation novels, I have a whole video about it here, as well as an entire video about cultivation itself, which I'll put a link up there as well. Long story short is, I don't have the time in my schedule to read a lot of cultivation novels. I spend a huge amount of time doing my own translating work and reading a huge amount of Chinese characters and English in terms of the cultivation, but my own stuff. By the time I get to the end of the day, I usually don't have the mental capacity to want to sit down and do more cultivation stuff. So because of that, I think there's probably a lot of people out there among you, the audience, who have a lot more experience in reading many different cultivation novels. I've tweeted about this and I've mentioned in other videos about giving recommendations. If you are a reader of cultivation novels and you have recommendations, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. I'm sure people who come along will be interested in having recommendations. If I was going to give one recommendation for the cultivation novels, I'll probably do Coiling Dragon, which you can get on Amazon. I'll put a link in the description below, along with links to all of the other novels that I'm going to recommend. Coiling Dragon is kind of like the gateway novel, I think, that gets a lot of people sucked into the Chinese fantasy novels. So as I mentioned, I'm going to have links in the description below to all of the novels that I'm talking about. Some of the novels you can get on Amazon. Some of the novels exist only as fan translations online. So I'll track them down and I'll give you the link so that you can go to the description below and find them very easily. So let's start with number 5. My number 5 top favorite that I recommend is by the author Gulong, and the novel is Heroes Shed No Tears. Now, full disclaimer here, I am the translator of the English version of this novel, and that's kind of why I put it at number 5, because I feel it would be a little disingenuous for me to put it at number 1 when I'm the translator. But whether it's in Chinese or English, I really, really do like this novel. It's one of my earlier translations, so I'm not sure I can really stand by the writing necessarily. I have improved exponentially, dramatically in my writing since my early days of translating. So it's been quite a few years since I went back to actually read it in terms of English, so I don't really know how good or bad the English is, but the story is just really, really cool. I did read it several times in Chinese, and I've read it several times in English, although it's been quite a few years. And I just really like the characters in this story. There are essentially 4 main characters, I would say, with some other supporting side characters. There's a lot of drama, there's mystery, there's intrigue, there's love triangles, and there's romance, and there's brotherhood, betrayal, all of these different things. Sometimes the people who are touted as good guys turn out to be not so good. It has one of the best, if not the best, villains in Wuxia novels, and maybe even just in fiction in general. I think he is an amazing villain. I really, really like him. He is extremely intelligent. He manipulates everybody. He's always one step ahead of the game. He's just a villain you love to hate, but at the same time, he has a really good backstory, and you actually kind of are sympathetic to him, I think, for pretty much most of the novel. He's kind of one of those bad guys that you just kind of really like him, even though he's the bad guy. And he's not just bad or evil. He's not evil per se, and he's not bad just for the sake of being bad. He's ruthless. And so that's why I like him as a villain. There are many adaptations of this novel. There is a television series that came out sometime in the last 10 years or so. There's a manhwa comic adaptation from Hong Kong. that you can find, I think, for free in various places online. There is a movie as well. Just be careful if you search for the movie, because there is another movie by the same name that is not anything at all Wuxia. It's like a 1980s like machine gun action movie, like war type. If I remember correctly, I think it's a John Woo movie. I may be mistaken, but if you search for Heroes Shed No Tears movie, that's going to be the first one that comes up. But you should still be able to find the other older movie version as well. So that's my number 5. In the number 4 slot is another Gulong novel. This one is called The 11th Son, and this is one that you can get on Amazon. You can check the link in the description below. And the reason I put this one on the list, for one reason, is because I think the only officially licensed Gulong wuxia novel that you can get. I could be wrong about that, but I'm not aware of any that have been officially licensed. Heroes Shed No Tears is a Gulong novel. It's unlicensed, although Ren, the owner of Wuxia World, has kind of talked to me throughout the years of the possibility of getting a license. It's never happened. It might one day. But Gulong's 11th Son is officially licensed. Now, I have to put a disclaimer here for this one. It's not the completed novel, and if I remember correctly, I don't think they even say that within the novel. It could, maybe they say it at the end, I forget. It ends on a cliffhanger, and it's actually only like the first half or the first quarter or something of the full novel in Chinese. The translator who did it never finished translating it, but did manage to get a license and then sell it. The ending is like a cliffhanger, and it's very dramatic and emotional. It actually functions well as an ending if you don't know that there's more to the story. Like I remember when I read it, I didn't even know. Maybe if it does say to be continued or something, I guess I didn't notice because I thought that was just a novel, and I found out years later that it wasn't complete. So The 11th Son, it's an official translation. It is well translated. It's a great introduction to Gulong. Gulong is a really famous writer, author, wuxia novelist. It's hard to say who I prefer more, him or Jin Yong. I'll get into Jin Yong in a second. But 11th Son is a perfect introduction. Gulong has these really eccentric and weird characters. He has very unique and bizarre storylines, and so this story is about this guy who's a really famous martial artist who gets dragged into this kind of like, I guess you could say, a web of horror. It's not a horror novel, but he gets involved in this really bizarre situation. The characters are really unique and interesting. Before I move on to number 3, I want to mention again, I've said this in other videos, so sorry if I'm repeating myself, but I was hired by a major publisher to co-write, to co-author a wuxia tabletop role-playing game that's going to be coming out later this year, 2020. That role-playing game is heavily inspired by Gulong. It originally started out as being almost exclusively inspired by his works. We eventually branched out to get inspiration from other places. But the point is just that role-playing game that's coming out later this year is really, really influenced by Gulong. So whether it's Heroes Shed No Tears or The 11th Son, I'm going to bring up one more Gulong story in the number 2 slot. It comes directly from that style of wuxia, so I really, really recommend those. For the role-playing game, you can pre-order it now on Amazon. If it's the kind of thing that interests you, go ahead and pre-order it so you don't forget about it. There's a price guarantee and all that. Moving on to number 3, this one is The Book and the Sword. Now, I mentioned Jin Yong a couple minutes ago. He is the preeminent and most famous of all wuxia novelists, and Gulong is kind of secondary. There's a couple other ones that are very famous as well. But Jin Yong is the most famous, and he has a set of books that are, I mean, I would venture to say that everybody in China has heard of them, even kids. When I was teaching in China, I had students of mine who were, I guess, middle school age, maybe even probably not as young as 10, maybe. Anyway, between 10 and 13, who were reading these novels. Now, the writing, even in Chinese, is pretty high-level writing, so it's not like, they're not children's novels by any stretch of the imagination, but the point is just, everybody knows about Jin Yong and his novels. Everybody has watched the movie adaptations or the TV shows. There are usually multiple TV shows or movie adaptations of almost all of his novels. This one is no exception, The Book and the Sword. There is an official translation of it that you can get on Amazon, link in the description. And it's one of the cool things about Jin Yong, and this book is no exception, is that they are often woven within real history. So within this book, one of the main characters is the Emperor of China, and it's talking about the real historical Emperor of China. One of the cool things about The Book and the Sword is that it takes a rumor, a legend, a myth about that specific emperor and weaves it into the story. So he was a Manchu emperor, but there were always these rumors swirling and stories that he was actually an ethnic Chinese and not a foreigner, a Manchu. And this novel gets into how that could have happened. It's a really typical wuxia novel with righteous heroes and sprawling jianghu and adventures that go across China. It's really, really fun. Highly recommend it. All right, we're to the number 2 slot, and this is going to be another Gulong one. This is Sentimental Swordsman, Ruthless Sword. and there are various translations of it. The main character of this novel is a guy named, well, in the English it sometimes gets translated as Little Li, because in the stories he's referred to it that way, and his fine dagger is reputedly the most powerful weapon in the Jianghu that Gulong created. So Gulong has this really sprawling Jianghu or martial arts world, and a lot of his novels are connected. So this character of Sentimental Swords and Ruthless Swords gets mentioned in many of the other novels, and the people are always talking about how amazing his dagger is, how fast it is, how it always hits the target, it never misses, and he's unbeatable. In the mythos of the Gulong universe, eventually he does die, if I remember correctly, and then his son picks up the dagger and continues to fight with it. The story Sentimental Sword and the Ruthless Sword itself has a lot of elements of brotherhood and loyalty. I really like it because of the main character himself. He's kind of sickly and he has a really tragic past, but he's always loyal to his friends and he always fights for his friends and what he believes is right. It's a really long and epic novel. I can't really summarize the plot here, but it's my number 2 most favorite. I do have to point out an Easter egg here. In the role-playing game I mentioned, which is called Righteous Blood, Ruthless Blades, we have a character in there that is a big homage to the main character of Sentimental Swordsman, Ruthless Sword. Okay, I'm down to my number 1 recommendation. This one is another fan translation, so you'll have to read it online, and it is Smiling Proud Wanderer. There are other different variations on the name because there have been, like I mentioned, movies and TV shows. The title Smiling Proud Wanderer is kind of a little weird because in Chinese it's Xiao Ao Jianghu, and I think it kind of implies basically laughing at the Jianghu in like an arrogant and superior way. That's because the main character of this story, who is one of my favorite fictional characters of all time, really does that. He kind of defies the code of Jianghu and just does whatever he wants. Now the thing about this novel, you can read it without knowing this, but knowing it is even cooler. The author, Jin Yong, he wrote this novel to be a political allegory, and one of the themes of the novel is that the righteous sects of Jianghu, so we're talking about Shaolin, Wudang, and the various like Taoist and Buddhist martial arts sects and whatnot, they tend to be righteous on the outside, but villainous on the inside. On the other hand, the unorthodox and the heretical martial arts organizations actually turn out to be a lot more honorable and in many times more righteous than the righteous ones. So the main character of Smiling Proud Wanderer is Ling Hu Chong. I just love him. He's a really cool person to begin with. I mean, say, he has his flaws, but what essentially happens to him is he loses all of his internal martial arts. Now in these novels, usually the internal martial arts are extremely important and powerful. You circulate your energy, a bit similar to cultivation, but he loses all of that, which essentially makes him powerless. So he's like Spider-Man without his spider powers. Despite that, he still acts like a true righteous and honorable swordsman should act. And the book describes initially his attempts to travel through the Jianghu, the martial arts world, to try to heal himself, and he stumbles into a variety of friendships with different people, including the unorthodox and evil characters that turned out to be not that bad. I really like how he doesn't really care what anybody thinks. He does what he thinks is right, and when I say he doesn't care what other people think, what I mean is that other people will accuse him of, you're doing this thing that's wrong, or you're doing that thing that's wrong, but in his mind he has his personal sense of honor and righteousness, and he sticks to it no matter what. I really like him. Eventually okay, I'm not going to get into any spoilers, sorry. So, those are my top 5. Heroes Shed No Tears, 11th Son, The Book and the Sword, Sentimental Swords and Ruthless Swords, and Smiling Proud Wanderer. My top 5 Wuxia novels. If you have not read all of them, I do suggest you put them on your reading list. They are all really good books. 2 of them have official translations. 3 of them do not, and of those 3, 1 of them is my own personal translation. If you're a fan of these novels, do you have others that you would like to recommend? There are obviously many out there, whether you're talking about Jin Yong. There are other Jin Yong novels that I really love, but I don't want to get into those right now. Maybe I'll bring them up in another video, like a secondary recommendations video or something. So that's it for this video. I hope that this helps for any of you out there who are not as familiar with the Wuxia novels. If you like the content, again, please do like and subscribe. I enjoy all the comments as well, and I'll see you in the next video. Godspeed.